Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Red Hot Square Off program. Let's meet this week's fabulous panel.
Hello, I'm Pat McDonough.
Hi, I'm Mary Cook.
Hi, I'm Thiru Vignarajah.
Hi, I'm Dick Gelfman.
And I'm Richard Sher. Welcome to Square Off. The Trump administration has concluded that no charges will be brought against the ICE agent who, according to them, was fearing for his life when he shot and killed 37-year-old protester Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis as she was driving off. Hundreds have protested, calling for a full government investigation, but the government says no way he was justified. Thiru, why don't you kick off? Give us your opinion.
Look, I have to approach this as a prosecutor, and a prosecutor is going to look at that video. Sure, there are ways that you can look at it from two different perspectives, but there is a very big difference between what that ICE agent plausibly could have feared for when he shot that first bullet and what he could have plausibly said when he fired the second and third. That's how prosecutors look at this. You don't get a chance to say, well, I was afraid, I shot him, and then the person was running in the other direction, and I still continued to shoot at them. And those second and third shots, he's standing to the side of the vehicle. He's pointing in the side window. It is horrific, and it's a tragedy, and it's almost remarkable how polarizing the interpretations of the same video have been. It just reminds you of how far apart our country is right now.
But what's the worst that could happen with an investigation? Why is this business of this event happens and all of a sudden we're not going to investigate? I've looked at the video and there's no reason to look at to do any investigation. That's not the way prosecutors that I know operate. They do a legitimate look. I always had, even in cases where my client was on the other side of what the U.S. attorney or state's attorney was doing, I always sort of felt that there was an honest approach. I mean, the colleagues that I went to law school with and practiced law with gave it an honest shot. When you say up front, as soon as the event is historically over, that we don't need to investigate. What's the worst that could happen? The worst that could happen is go ahead and investigate. And if you change your opinion, fine. If you don't change your opinion, but to say we're not going to investigate, that's a problem.
So
That's
I think, I agree with Thiru's assessment, but I think, but I want to go back to what Dick said, because I think fundamentally the problem with this is we have we have never had a situation where there is a police involved shooting where a person dies, or an agent involved shooting where a person dies, where it is not fully investigated by the government. And quite frankly, there are a lot of reasons to investigate that go well beyond the issue of guilt or innocence of the person ultimately who did the shooting and the involvement of the person who was the victim of the shooting. And one of those things is police training. And best practices. You learn a tremendous amount of information from investigating these types of cases. You adapt your training. It is pretty clear that the ICE agents are not trained at all. They have been put out on this, large numbers of ICE agents have been put out on the streets with very little training. This would certainly serve as a training tool, if nothing else. Having said all of that, I 100% agree with Thiru's assessment of what happened in this particular case. And let me just say one more thing, and I know Pat's going to jump in. Not only is this a situation where they're not investigating the agent who shot Renee Good, they are affirmatively trying to investigate her wife. So this is not even just we are convinced and we are not going to investigate. This is a full-on political decision.
Thank you, Mary. Pat, time to hear from you.
Well, it was a federal offense. The federal government has supremacy over state in this situation. And number one, they are investigating it, and they have investigated it. Number two, we don't hear anything about the officer. The officer is a veteran from the United States Army. He has 3 children. He was injured just 3 weeks before that, so he's a little touchy about what's going on. The way I viewed it is she backed up so she could get her speed up. She could have stayed right where she was. The officer was right there, and she could have turned and left. She was causing problems all week. They were having trouble with her. So no, nobody deserves to die as a result of making a mistake or a choice. I agree with that. But who in the heck is going to trust, especially from the Trump administration, the Minnesota state's attorney or the Minnesota attorney general? If they don't find anything wrong with all the fraud that's going on in Minnesota, how honest can they be?
So the answer, so I have to address Pat. So I got to say preliminarily, that is your opinion. That is not a factual investigation. That's what a jury ultimately decides. If it is, you take it to a grand jury. If a grand jury thinks that there should be charges, then the charges are presented and you go in front of a jury and have 12 jurors of your peer determine whether or not you are guilty or innocent. That is the job of a jury. We can all have our individual opinions on it. They don't count for crap. Okay, that's number one. Number two, I really don't care what his background is. When you get on the street and you strap on that badge and that gun, you have a responsibility to the citizens of this country, and you have to leave your personal baggage behind. So all of those things mean nothing to me. It's the same as if I have personal things going on and I represent a client and I screw up. I can't then say to the client, I'm really sorry, my dad was sick, so I didn't do my job. That's not acceptable.
So, go ahead. I see you on the clock.
First of all, I'm going to respond to Mary.
Let me say one more thing, and then you can respond to both of us. There's 3 things I just need to add. If you are traumatized by an injury on the job from a few weeks earlier, you address that trauma before you get back to work, where you carry a gun every day in exactly the kinds of circumstances where you were traumatized the first time. The second thing is, I can tell you, and I'm sure there's lots of people who agree, that there are improper prosecutions of police officers. I do not defend Marilyn Mosby's prosecution of the officers in Freddie Gray. And you know what happened? A judge and a jury acquitted those individuals because there was insufficient evidence. If, Pat, there is sufficient evidence that a good defense attorney can marshal, that he genuinely feared for his life, so be it. But to not do the investigation in Baltimore City, every single police-involved fatality automatically gets an investigation. Those officers are put to the side and the investigation is done. Sometimes it takes 2 weeks, sometimes it takes 2 years, but you don't make an exception because it's an ICE agent and J.D. Vance has something to say about it.
I do want to add one point before you, Pat, and that is that Renee Good's family says it will pay for its own investigation. That's just a point.
Well, I think that's appropriate, and of course there is a civil matter involved with this incident. However, there was an investigation. They determined that it should not go to a grand jury, so there was no need for a jury to come in as far as the federal government, which had authority and jurisdiction. And beyond that, I mean, there are a lot of people who agree with this guy. He just received $800,000 in his GoFundMe fund for people from all over America. And I know you guys are all liberals and you're all Democrats, and God bless you. But I have my opinion, and a lot of people think the same way I do.
Dick.
I got to tell you, first of all, I'm a former prosecutor married to a former Baltimore City police lieutenant. So don't label me, please. I really would appreciate it if I don't get labeled. I believe very strongly in law and order. But here's what I would say to you. Literally within an hour of this shooting having occurred, Kristi Noem got on television and said that it was justified and referred to the victim as a domestic terrorist. The language that has come out of the White House and its spokespeople as relates to this, to Renee Good, is probably one of the most atrocious things I've ever seen, because the fact of the matter is that you are supposed to stay out of that and let law enforcement do their job. They didn't do that. Everything became partisan immediately. Let the process do.
Can I say something in response to that?
Pat,
First of all, let me say something. I'm getting attacked here, Richard. I would like to respond.
I'm not cutting you off.
Number one, We have police officers constantly getting into situations in the state of Maryland where someone is shot and there is a brief investigation or no investigation at all. The administration decides that it was a shooting was okay, it was needed. Secondly, I want to say this. We want to talk about language. We want to talk about rhetoric. This knucklehead that's the governor of the state of Minnesota, his language is inciting people to get out on the streets. And where are the police officers in Minnesota that were supposed to be there to protect the citizens? You've got the mayor, who's worse than the governor, inciting people to get out on the street. And in addition to that, you don't have police officers there to work with the situation. This is a liberal left state, and they are pro sanctuary, and that's the end of it.
Dick Gelfman, you've been sitting there patiently. Let's hear from you.
What really concerns me too is as we look at the decision, for example, we're not going to investigate. As I look at that, you know something? That's one of the additional things that makes me sit back and say, is it time to have really lost faith here in the judicial system and the U.S. attorneys and prosecutors? And why do I not now have confidence in when a U.S. attorney, when somebody in the Justice Department, obviously a Trump Justice Department, but before that it was a Biden Justice Department. So I'm not faulting the fact that, you know, a president chooses people he thinks will be the best for the country and the best for him or her. But what I am really bothered by is that I've been a lawyer for a number of years, and the average citizen that's out there that has never been in a courtroom have lost confidence in the government. I don't trust what the Justice Department says now. I don't trust what an assistant U.S. attorney says. What I do have some pride in is when they said, okay, let's investigate Renee Good's wife and let's see if she's a bad person. 7 assistant U.S. attorneys who are told to do that resigned.
They were all Biden attorneys.
And that makes me say, okay, there's some out there, God bless them.
All right, I do want to say something.
They were all Biden attorneys.
Can I add one last thing? Because this is important.
Certainly.
And I think Mary will appreciate this as a former prosecutor. Pat, I got to tell you, there are so many instances where I have been on the exact opposite political view because I believe that someone should be prosecuted. I don't know when this happened. When I started at the U.S. Attorney's Office, when I went to the city, when I was Deputy Attorney General, it never crossed my mind that I would say, oh, this is a federal supremacy cause case. Because the feds have declined to do it, we're not going to take it over. If there was a fraud, local fraud, food stamp fraud, I would go after it, even though that looks like a conservative prosecution. And conversely, on the other side, if they wanted to prosecute cops for shooting someone and there wasn't evidence, I promise you I would say no to that. And Dick's right. Something has changed in the last 5, 10, 15 years. I don't know who to blame for it, but something has changed so dramatically that prosecutions are no longer right down the middle. It wasn't that way. It really wasn't that way.
All right, let me say this. The White House is also in full support of the president's response to a heckler at the Ford auto plant in Detroit on Tuesday. The auto worker called Trump, quote, a pedophile protector, obviously referring to Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Trump's response, F you, while giving the guy the presidential middle finger of honor. What do you have to say about that, Pat?
I think it's a good deal because he gets heckled all the time. But Trump is Trump. Trump is an unusual personality. He's straightforward. He's transparent. He conducts news conferences with the media every single day. Joe Biden used to go to his basement and go to sleep. I mean, the Trump haters are Trump haters. And anything he does is terrible. I think he's wonderful. There's a lot of things I don't like about him, like giving the finger and shouting at that guy. No, I don't accept that. I don't like that. But, the Democrats are out of control. Let me give you an example on what Thiru was just talking about. All the prosecutors in the state, practically every single one of them, including Bates, are down in Annapolis right now because the pro-criminal legislators, including, I think his name is, I forgot what his name is. He's the chairman of the Judiciary Committee. But anyway, they all want to take away the current law on juveniles by having juveniles can go into the adult court system under certain violent crimes. They want to take that away. They want to make it more difficult. Here we have juveniles out of control in Baltimore City and everywhere else, stealing cars, attacking women and seniors. And here are the pro-criminal politicians in Annapolis. They want to make it tougher to prosecute these people.
All right.
So first of all, I will tell you that I was a prosecutor in the juvenile. I was a bailiff in juvenile court in 1985.
Really?
Yes, I was a law clerk in the juvenile division of the state's attorney's office until 1988, and then I was a prosecutor in the juvenile division for 3 years after that. The crime that we see is the same crime that I saw back then. So this idea that
Not
somehow
getting any better.
well, will you please stop interrupting?
Well, it's not getting any better. You just said that.
Let's not interrupt
do
each
your
other,
job.
please. Let Pat quiet.
The
Please.
answer to what to do with juveniles has been a problem for the last 50 years. And there are lots and lots of issues. And I think that you pointed out, getting rid of the waiver provisions, which is what that is, waiving someone from adult. There are some crimes for which people are automatically charged as adults, which they're subject to being sent back to juvenile court. And then there are times when you can waive a child from juvenile to adult court, depending on what the crime is. Okay. Those problems are longstanding and they are very, very involved issues. And to take a stand that, this is, one aspect of it determines the answer to the question is, to me, a little bit naive.
We're going to have to stop.
Nobody said that.
Stop.
Nobody said that.
Having said that, I'm really sort of tired of hearing "let Trump be Trump." Look, the giving the finger is just, I think, one example of the fact that he can't take the pressure anymore and he is unraveling. His polls are in the basement.
Okay, Mary.
Everybody thwarts what he does at every opportunity, and I think he's just unraveling, and that's more evidence of it.
Well, we have to do
the
is stop
Democrats
for
are
a moment,
unraveling.
Pat, everyone. We must pause to hear from the voice of Square Off. Here's Howard Mallison. Please support our sponsors. They make this possible. Howard, let's hear from you.
Hey, Richard. For breakfast, lunch, and dinner, your choice for a great meal starts at the Double T Diner. And all the menu choices are served the entire day. The Double T Diner has locations all over town: Route 40 West, Perry Hall, White Marsh, Bel Air, Laurel, Annapolis, Pasadena, and the EC Diner in Ellicott City. You've never seen a menu with so many selections. It's why the Double T Diner wins so many reader polls. Plus, Monday nights are lobster night at By the Docks, part of the Double T family. Let them know you heard about them on Square Off. And with so many cars on the road and distracted drivers everywhere, auto accidents are going to happen. And if you've experienced an accident, the insurance companies can't tell you where to take your car. That's why more and more drivers are trusting their auto repairs and maintenance to leading edge auto body and mechanical repair. They work on all makes and models and offer free pickup and delivery anywhere in the Baltimore area. So give them a call at 410-443-6433 or visit them at 5807 Falls Road in Mount Washington. They make your car look and run like new again. And
Whoa.
one more. If you're experiencing any kind of foot pain that requires medical attention, I recommend Dr. Kelly Gagan, a well-respected certified podiatrist and heel specialist. No one is immune from foot problems. And also, if your concern is the appearance of your feet, Dr. Gagan has a long record of success using laser treatments to correct your issue. Plus, they're safe, painless, and go right to the root of the problem. I just want to say this: don't suffer from the agony of defeat. Start winning with a call to Dr. Gagan at 410-753-4422 to set up an appointment. Once again, that's 410-753-4422. And back to you, Richard.
Mary enjoyed agony of defeat. All I can say about Dr. Gagan is she is terrific. Now, I do want to mention before we get to the Annapolis thing, the Annapolis topic. If the violent protests don't stop in Minneapolis, President Trump threatens to invoke the Insurrection Act, which is a U.S. federal law first enacted back in 1807, gives the president the authority to deploy military forces within the United States. Dick, what do you think?
It's been an act, people say, my God, that would be a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, I don't happen to agree with much of what Trump does, but one of those things, I mean, the fact is, it has been used a number of times. I mean, take a look at the Rodney King situation, civil rights disorders that we've had. I mean, it is not something that is a holy moly, we better not do that. If we do that, we're on the brink of a civil war. I think somebody did a count of something and it was like it's been used 46 times.
All right, Pat, go ahead, someone.
I think one of the problems is that he is talking about using the Insurrection Act at the same time he's talking about not having midterm elections in 2026. And so the thing that bothers me is the confluence of those two issues.
Yeah, well, the problem is who will Greenland fight with in his in his latest tirade.
I bet anybody here on the panel a steak dinner that we're going to have midterm elections. Secondly, Mary just admitted that the juvenile justice system in Maryland has been a failure forever. Now, the prosecutors disagree with her, and she's a former prosecutor. They don't want this law changed. They just got it in place last year, and they like it, and they say it's working. But the legislators are pro-criminal politicians down there. They always have been. Just look at the record the past 20 years. And also, Trump, I don't think Trump is going to cancel the midterm elections. If anybody is having mental breakdowns, it's the Democrat Party, not Trump. He's doing okay.
All right, I want to go to Annapolis because we're running the clock out. The 90-day session of the 2026 Maryland General Assembly began this past Wednesday at noon in Annapolis. Lawmakers working on the state budget, energy, housing, education, funding, and other issues. And while the legislature gets down to business, Gonzalez Research and Media says their latest poll shows a mixed bag for Governor Moore, whose approval numbers have, as they say, dipped slightly. However, if the election were held today, Governor Moore, says the firm, a Gonzalez firm, that Governor Moore would be re-elected. Thiru, what's up? What do you think, guys?
Look, no question he would get reelected. I do think he has to worry about what the current state of his control over the Democratic Party in Maryland is. I never thought I'd see the day that Bill Ferguson and Wes Moore would have such a vocal and spirited public debate on an issue of real significance. Those are the kinds of things that sophisticated politicians like both of them are, take offline, resolve behind closed doors, and come back with a united front. I candidly will tell you, I guarantee you that's what Larry Hogan would have done, right? And so the challenge for me is not that Wes Moore is not going to be the governor of Maryland for as long as he wants. The question is whether or not he is able to elevate to the next level where obviously he wants to go, given his difficulty to kind of run a smooth ship here in the state. I'd like to see a little bit more stability out of Annapolis with him at the helm. It just looks like a lot of issues that ought to be straightforward end up being needlessly complicated.
We're trying to make your comments a little more brief, please. Next, who's on the table?
Take it. I have Tom Gonzalez on my radio show tomorrow night.
Oh, really?
And I've been talking with him all week. Some interesting points about the poll. The independent voters, which are now the second highest voting group in the state of Maryland, they have gone ahead of the Republicans, and the Democrats have dropped. But they are moving away from Moore. Independent voters are issue voters. They vote on performance. He has had a failed governorship. He has lied to the people. He has misled the people. I'm not going to raise taxes. Said that in the last year, but he raised taxes. The guy, where are the wins? Where are the victories? Now, Hogan is thinking about running as an independent. I don't know what that means or why that's the idea, but he has gone from 64% in the last election. I'm talking about Westmore. He has dropped down to 50%. That's a big drop. A big drop. And I've seen some other polls that make it look worse. So, yes, he's probably going to be governor unless the Republicans wake up. They go after the independent votes, and Republicans don't vote. Got to give credit to Democrats. In Maryland, Democrats vote. Republicans vote at 40%. Democrats vote at 55%. So unless they get off their butts and they go after the independent vote, then they might have a chance whenever they get a candidate. I'm not
Miss
sure.
Mary, you're up.
So I don't think that Westmore has been by any stretch of the imagination the perfect governor, but I will say this. I think it's a little unfair to say that a year ago what he was talking about as relates to the budget, because in that time, Doge took, slashed so many jobs that were Maryland jobs, so many federal jobs that were Maryland jobs, and really impacted the tax base in the state of Maryland. And so I think that there are a lot of issues and a lot of the landscape has changed since Trump became president. I think a governor has to be, now, mind you, I think a governor has to be flexible and come up with solutions to those problems. I mean, that's your job. You've got to figure that out. You've got to be flexible enough to deal with those kinds of issues. But I do think that the political climate is such that it would be difficult for anyone with this particular budget, and I think impossible for anyone to say that taxes are not going to go up. The problem is we already pay a crap ton of taxes in Maryland, and that is a very unpopular way to address a budget shortfall.
Dick, we'll go Thiru, then Dick.
Look, all I was going to say is
Make it brief.
my unsolicited advice to Governor Moore from a guy who's lost a lot of elections is he just needs to decide who he is. Is he to the left of Gavin Newsom? Is he the sensible moderate? I worry a lot that what we see in his governorship is him trying to decide who he wants to be on the national stage before knowing who he is at the local stage.
All right.
What I always wonder when I hear some response to some criticism he gets is how much are his decisions being influenced by his relationship or lack thereof with Trump? I mean, are we in such a, I remember after the bridge collapse, it was like, well, yeah, we are going to be able to get along. This is what I'm going to do for Maryland, and this is how it's going to happen. And it doesn't seem to have improved a lot since that time. It seems like there have been a lot of occasions where there've been a very negative kind of relationship between our governor and our president at this time. How are we being affected by that now?
Westmore says he is definitely running for a second term in Annapolis and not for president of the United States, although his name is certainly out there and he sure shows up on a lot of network newscasts. So we'll have to see what's what. We're going to pause for a second and talk about John Harbaugh's new contract with the New York Giants. How about that, Mary? We'll be back in a moment.
Thanks, Richard. Pappas restaurants and sports bars are synonymous with the best crab cake you'll ever taste. But there's lots more to the Pappas menu, a whole lot more. There's a whole host of specialty dishes you won't find anywhere else. So for fine dining, special occasions, or just watching sports, Pappas should be your number one choice. That's why Oprah put the Pappas crab cake on her favorite things list. And Pappas ships their crab cakes all over the country with 4 locations: Parkville, Cockeysville, Glen Burnie, and Bel Air. I guarantee you'll become a Pappas regular. And if you or a family member has experienced personal injury, medical malpractice, or nursing home neglect, it's time to call the law firm of Barry Glazer. He has the legal team and resources to go after the big insurance companies to get you every penny he can. And with an in-house medical doctor and nurse, his attorneys always work on the toughest and most complex medical malpractice cases. Barry Glazer is your best advocate for the injured, disabled, and medically abused. So give Barry Glazer a call at 410-547-8568 and let him know you heard about him on Square Off. Back to you, Richard.
All right, let me say quickly, Pat, when is your radio show on? What night?
So on Saturday nights from 8 until 10, and it's the #1 radio show on the weekends in the state of Maryland on WCBM.
Very good.
And it's not just me, it's me and Valerie.
Oh, well, of course, Miss Valerie is the star of the show, we can imagine.
Yes, she is. I
John
get a word in
Harbaugh.
occasionally.
John Harbaugh, the word is, he had to just leave the Baltimore Ravens, and unfortunately, he's ending up with a 5-year, $100 million contract, supposedly, with the New York Giants. What do you think of that, Mary? You're a fan.
I think he's way overpaid. I honestly think he's a mediocre coach. I think that they had a lot of talent and he didn't know what
I
to do
agree
with
with
it.
Mary.
And I think his offensive coordinators and his defensive coordinators, for the most part, his picks have been terrible. So
God.
I'm not sad to see him go.
I've seen
Thiru?
I mean, the big talk was the heartbreak of the end of season disappointments we've had for a number of years. But, for 18 years, I'm sorry, he built a heck of an organization in terms of, wins overall and in terms of the way the game is played in Baltimore and the reputation it developed for its defensive at times and then its, offensive work at times. I just was great having John here. I'm sorry to see him leave. I think he's a great person and he set the right tone for that football team.
Yeah.
I think Mike Tomlin is a great man in Pittsburgh. I think John Harbaugh is a great man in Baltimore. But the reality is that the one Super Bowl he won was a little bit of a stroke of luck itself. I think the time was necessary. Was it all his responsibility? Probably not. But I think the time had come. My one regret is that this didn't happen last year because we could have the head coach for the Seattle Seahawks be the head coach for the Baltimore Ravens for a bargain. And the fact that we lost a once in a generation genius like that, who's now, taking the Seahawks likely to the Super Bowl is pretty wrenching.
My coach.
Yeah, I can't believe this, Richard. I'm going to put it in my history book. I agree with all three of my Democratic opponents
Oh, my
on
goodness.
everything they said.
Start
And,
CPR. Start CPR.
And here's the deal. 13 games lost in the past 2 years in the last quarter when they were ahead by 2 touchdowns. Dick is right. He was wonderful. But when you do that kind of performance, you gotta go.
And that stat, by the way, that stat is the most in NFL history.
That's right. That's true.
So can I tell you, I have one name to say, Derrick Henry, how you don't give the guy the ball.
Oh, gee.
That's
And
insane.
don't overrule your offensive coordinator on that is mind-blowing.
That's insane. It's
Mary,
insane.
I was in Pittsburgh when they decided to just center the ball, and I was like, nope, he's gonna miss it. It's gonna happen because there was such an obvious extra 5 yards and
Right.
All right. Well, I am certainly nauseated and looking forward to saying goodbye to you folks. Thiru, it's been too long. We have to have you back in a few weeks. Mary, we love you. I'm glad you're not too busy in the courtroom. Have time to tape. Pat, we're so happy you figured out how to work the system here so we can see.
Well, I'm not the technical person in the family.
All right. And Miss Valerie is. And Dick,
Yes.
It's always a pleasure to get Gelfman.
Hey, you're old enough to remember that.
I sure am.
I think
And
we
will
all
see.
are.
Thank you all so much for joining us on Square Off. Tell your friends about it, squareoff.net or on YouTube.
Square Off Show at Square Off Show.
I understand that, Howard, a voice from nowhere. We'll see you next time. Have a great week. When once again we square off. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rich.